So today we're speaking to Scott Monty, who is live from Michigan in the United States. Scott is a strategic communication and leadership coach who has worked for Ford Motors, with Walmart, IBM, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Google, to name just a few. He has been described as a visionary, as well as featuring as #1 on The Economist list of top 25 social business leaders. Scott is also a regular contributor to our magazine, Lundquist Quarterly, and we're delighted to have him here with us today. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you today.
So, Scott, you have a unique way of addressing the challenges of modern leadership and communications by drawing from history, art, literature, and philosophy in your newsletter, Timeless and Timely, where you generously share some of your insights. Could you tell us a bit more about why you think history can be a help in addressing the issues of the future?
Yeah, it seems to me that so many executives are constantly looking for futurists. We're looking for certainty to help guide us to where we're going, the decisions we're making, the investments that we are making, the technology we choose, even the talent we hire, and the behaviors that we see. And yet, there's more certainty in history, right? Because we already know what happened. We know what the outcomes were. That's the beauty of looking backwards. And if you understand patterns, and if you understand human behavior, which is incredibly consistent over the course of recorded history, that in itself will enable you to kind of predict where things are going. And to me, I see so many people forgetting things that have happened, even in recent history, that looking back 5-10 years, let alone 5 or 10 centuries, we can see these patterns emerge, and we can help ourselves avoid mistakes and even leapfrog the competition by becoming smarter about how humans behave and what we can expect.
Thank you for your interesting viewpoint. So, you're a regular contributor to Lundquist Quarterly magazine. In this year's first issue, you wrote an article on why truth matters and the relationship between honesty, transparency, trust, and ultimately loyalty. How does it all fit together?
Well, there is such a lack of trust in society right now, whether it's with business or governments or other entities. And to me, the more we remove ourselves from human to human interaction, the more opportunity there is for distrust to be sown. And by creating opportunities where we have dialogue with each other, where there's more transparency in how a process plays out behind the scenes. And this doesn't necessarily mean that a company has to give away all of its secrets. There's a sense of how much transparency you can provide while bringing people into the process without completely giving away secrets. But in doing so, you make them feel valued. You make them feel like they're part of the journey with you. And that inherently builds a more honest relationship and in turn builds trust. And when you build trust over time, you'll find that people are more loyal. You'll have more retention with loyal employees. You'll have better retention numbers with customers, which then makes it less onerous for sales and lead generation and all the rest, where people spend a lot of money to try and get new leads in. Well, look, if you are treating the people that are already part of your community in a way that increases trust, that in turn is going to increase loyalty, and that's going to drive down the cost of doing business.
The US has been through a few dramatic years, first with the disruption of traditional politics and values under the Trump administration. This, of course, culminated with the assault of the Capitol. In parallel, the pandemic has swept away all sense of normality. What do you think will be the more long-standing effects of the traumatic events in terms of communication and how companies address the future?
I think we've learned a lot about ourselves in the last 4 or 5 years. The way we communicate, the way we deal with others, the way we deal with perhaps opinions that are different from our own. And I think that and the pandemic, it kind of brings to mind the need for more empathy in the world, more understanding of how other people are affected by things. And wherever you fall on a particular debate, there is another side to it. And whether it makes sense to you or not, it makes sense to the person on the other side of that conversation. And simply by stepping back and listening more and having more understanding and empathy can help you determine where you need to take the conversation, where the communication needs to go in the future. I think we've seen evidence time and again that simply spouting facts at people is not going to get through to people that simply don't agree. But providing them a safe place to voice their opinions and to let them know that they're being heard and that be able to have a reciprocal conversation, I think there's great hope for us, even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty.
We're always curious about how to express leadership in digital and social media channels and develop a credible story at a time when business is constantly being asked to make its voice heard on current but often very contentious issues. As a renowned expert on social media, who do you admire particularly in the US? And could you give us a few examples that European companies can look to for inspiration?
Well, there's a lot of examples out there now, thankfully, good examples. Thinking of one that I followed for a long time, Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta Airlines, I think has done a remarkable job. The airline over the last 10 years has really transformed itself. Delta had, in the United States, acquired Northwest Airlines. And there was a lot of difficulty, not only with the systems integration, but with simple customer service. And at every turn, I've seen Delta double down on customer service and what it means to actually serve the people that are frequenting the airline. And it starts with the way they treat their employees. Something as simple as creating a more chic and a comfortable uniform for their flight employees, their flight attendants, made a huge difference. It was no longer something stiff and polyester, and they gave the employees a choice of exactly how they'd like to enjoy their attire. That in turn actually flowed over into the way they treated customers that were on board or perhaps on the phone. And if you've ever called Delta Airlines for customer service on their phone, they ask you to remain on the line to answer a survey. It's something you hear many companies doing. Would you take a quick survey after your call? Fine. But Delta does it differently. They say, would you answer one question? Well, who wouldn't be willing to answer one single question? But the genius with the way Delta has approached this, and this has been going on for many years and has informed how they do business, is their question is, think about the person that just handled your call. If you ran a business that used customer service, would you hire this person to work for you? Well, you think about the profundity behind that question and about all of the different ways to approach it. That in turn helps Delta keep hiring the right kind of people to treat people in the right way. And throughout the pandemic, we've seen personal communications from Ed Bastian, the CEO, coming into inboxes everywhere. He's recently launched his own podcast where he interviews other industry leaders. And again, you strip down the corporate aspect of it, and you get to see real people having real conversations. So suddenly it's no longer this kind of symbolic corporate gesture and this nameless, faceless entity. It actually gets down to a message from Ed. And that makes a great deal of difference when you're dealing with millions and millions of passengers.
Thank you, Scott, for giving us a very real example of how companies can use leadership to communicate and connect with stakeholders. For those of you who want to stay up to date with Scott's insights, you can follow him on social media, subscribe to his newsletter, Timeless and Timely, and of course read his articles in Lundquist Quarterly. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for allowing me to join you here, and I'll see you on the internet.